Hello, everyone. I am joined by some of the most esteemed game designers in the world here. The guys involved in the development and design of Star Wars X-Wing, one of my favorite games of all time. So, real quick, give me your name and kind of your history with X-Wing. So we'll start down here with a newer face.
Yeah, so I'm the new guy on X-Wing. My name is Max Brooke. I've been on X-Wing for about a year and a half now, which makes me the new guy compared to your respective 5 years.
You're the new guy until we get another new guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Sorry, buddy.
No, I know. Listen, that was me in the RPG team for 3.5 years. I was the new guy for 3.5 years, and I made Kat for like a minute, and then she became fiction editor. And I was the new guy again.
Always the new guy. Awesome. So you're the new guy, the fresh face, bringing new ideas to the table.
That's the hope.
Excellent.
Max, the new guy, Brooke.
And you, of course, are...
The one and only splendtabularific Alex Davy. I'm just Alex Davy.
Just Alex Davy, the one and only. You've been on X-Wing for quite some time, so...
Yep, although Frank's got me by a nose.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Frank is the old guy.
Yeah.
Frank is the old guy.
He does have...
I think you have a cane in the back.
Yes,
He does have
I didn't
mutton
bring
chops
it
for it.
here, but I did bring it to
It's
work
true.
today. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for sitting down with me. That said, we're going to be covering the FAQ that happened before Worlds 2016 in the meta, and we're even going to be talking about Wave 10, some spoilers there, and how that is going to affect the game of Star Wars X-Wing. Before we dive in, if you have not checked out our compatible tokens and templates for Star Wars X-Wing, do that. They're awesome, and you should take a look. So we're going to dive in. First up, there was an FAQ that came a few weeks before Worlds. Some pretty big changes there. So what were the biggest changes, and what was the intent from you guys on the meta going into the World Championship?
Sure. I'll lead off on this
Whoever wants to take it.
We'd been watching a lot of the current sort of state of the metagame, what was winning tournaments, sort of the effect that it was having on players, what we were seeing out in the wild. Of course, we paid close attention to Gen Con, and what we were seeing throughout all of this is a couple of areas in the game that we felt could really use a slight adjustment. Primary among those was the contracted scout with Deadeye, torpedoes, astromechs, the old trip jumps. Very, very powerful list. Not unbeatable by any means, but what we were seeing is games end very, very quickly. We were seeing this sort of alpha strike, either delete an enemy list from the board or cripple it such that the game was over very quickly, one way or another, typically. Yeah. And it was also pushing a lot of list archetypes completely out of the meta. So it was having this kind of diversity diminishment effect that we saw. I think the last time we saw that in a big way was the TIE Phantom. Mm-hmm. So we thought really hard about how to try to rein that in a little bit, reel it back a little bit. So we just started looking at all the different pieces in play in that puzzle, and we ended up landing on Deadeye as the one that was sort of the most that was taking it outside of the sort of normal fair rules of play, so to speak.
Sure.
Because low pilot skill ships often struggle with ordnance because of the difficulty in acquiring that early target lock. But with Deadeye in play, the jump masters were very, very, very difficult to outfly and pretty easy to fly fairly well.
Yeah.
So it was an easy list to pick up and do pretty well with. It was very difficult to compete against unless you're a very, very good player. And it was having this kind of minimizing effect on the diversity of the meta. So we looked at the pieces of the puzzle and we thought, if they can't get that focus token, if they can't pick their targets quite so easily, if they are actually punished in a way for their lower pilot skill, that is not going to be such a dominant force.
But still good if you're good
at
flying.
But still pretty good. Yeah, we did see, we saw one triple jump master list in the top 16. I believe it may have made top 8, but it may have been knocked out in the top 16. But in any case, it was doing
the game.
reasonably well in the final. So it's by no means completely gone. Our intent was definitely not to push it out. So that was the big one. That was the big one that we knew was going to be a real game changer. And then there were a couple little ones trying to give a little edge to the oft neglected M3A interceptor, and just trying to bring bombs into play a little bit better by giving a slight upward nudge to cluster bombs. So basically, we did a number of little things and then one big thing with the Deadeye change.
Yeah.
And I think we saw a much more open and interesting selection of squads.
I was going to say, how did that play out at Worlds? We've now had the World Championship. You were able to watch a couple days of Swiss, the second day of Swiss, basically, with the top cut. How was the meta?
I was really pleased. I thought that there were more interesting Rebel lists out there than there would have been otherwise. There was a wide variety in the Rebel faction list that did get brought to the table. The Rebel representation was not as high as the other two factions, but the lists that were there were all kind of different and interesting, including yours, my good man. This gentleman, of course, flew a Biggs, Kanan, and Ezra list that did very, very well. We had him on the stream.
Yeah.
Taken out by triple
defenders.
That was brutal.
That was brutal. So it works, right? Triple jump masters didn't dominate.
They were very present, but they weren't necessarily dominating.
Yeah, the jump master is a ship, right? Ultimately won. Mm-hmm. Right, that was the list that won was Ingrid, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so clearly the ship itself, the platform, has a lot of viable options,
which is cool.
We just pulled back on the one that seemed to be having the most, not only impact on the meta, but also the most sort of negative play experience particularly for new players who could be very easily removed from a match within a matter of 5, 6, 7 minutes.
Like first engagement. It's just your ships are gone.
Third turn, you're like,
and a good player would know how to deal with that better, but you sort of had this differential where it was easy to play but very hard to play against. Yeah. Not that easy to play is a bad thing, but when it's those two things in combination, it's very challenging for newer players to overcome something like that.
Sure.
It's also a list that's more comp dependent than a lot of them.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the tools to deal with it, you may not be able to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You really do have to tech around it. You have to figure out how to handle that kind of firepower. So
in contrast, we saw a lot of defenders, but they still sort of play the game still.
Yeah, you're still playing X-wing.
Yeah, they don't. Their tricks are basically I'm hard to kill. That's the trick. But at the end of the day,
fast, hard to kill.
Yeah, they will move quickly. They're very predictable in their movement patterns, but they are still hard to play. So it's fun. It's still good for the game in that even though the defenders we're seeing a lot of prominence of them. They are still sort of playing the normal game of X-Ray.
Yeah, and it's not in the kind of way that you knock an opponent out of the game in turn 3 with defenders, right? Like it's a very unlikely scenario versus they just are very consistent, very hard to. They have a lot of health. Mm-hmm. They're hard to deal with, but they're beatable. They're very beatable, right?
Yeah,
as we saw, cut, right? They got beat.
We saw a ton of them in the tournament. We saw a lot of them in the top 16, and they all got knocked out. That being said, we very easily could have had, I think, a defender list win Worlds this year. They're very strong, and they placed very, very highly. But they do seem to be in a place that at least players can kind of play around. The games are longer and more exciting with more twists and turns, and there are sort of tools in place to handle defenders. Higher pilot skill is pretty helpful because they don't, unlike the other sort of Imperial Aces, they don't really have pilot skill 8 and 9. Sure. So if you can out PS them, as we saw with Kevin Lintz's list, they have a very difficult time handling that. That was a cool list.
Yeah. So next question is in Kevin's list is one I think is kind of why I'm getting here. What were the surprising things you saw at Worlds? Like maybe you didn't expect it, or maybe it was more of it than expected. But what were you not expecting that you got?
Han and Jake. That was top 4.
That's an old school list. I don't think there's a card in there that's past wave with like Rebel Aces.
That is classic. That is a classic.
It's a classic build, and it had a really good chance to win. Actually, it almost knocked out. In my opinion, I mean, it went south after a certain point, but in my opinion, with the opening engagement against Nan's World's winning list, I think Nan dodged a bit of a bullet there because his Dengar was down to 4 hull after that first exchange, and all he'd done in return was strip a couple shields off of Jake, and I think 1 off of the Falcons.
Yeah,
so we could have been looking at Rebel on Rebel in the finals again, very, very nearly.
Yeah, because if it gets down to Mandarin versus Han, That is a Han.
Oh, Han's got that.
Han's
Especially
got that
tooled
in
up
spades,
the
right?
way that 63-point Han was tooled up.
Yeah, dad mode.
Yeah, it could put the hammer down.
Oh man!
But he kept Dengar alive. Nand, of course, flew amazingly all weekend.
Yeah.
And knocked Han Jake out of the top 4. But that is a very old school list, still doing very well at this
Which
tournament.
is cool.
Yeah, it is very cool.
Very cool. So you have that, and you have Kevin's list on the other side, which was Corrin and Miranda, right? The shield regen craziness, and like I watched him play a top 4 game, and it was just like,
oh yeah,
this is obnoxious, like what you were doing to your opponent here.
Super slippery. I think we watched Kevin all day able to slip out and away from engagements, circle back in when he had the advantage, draw the games out, and unfortunately for Kevin, he finally met his match because Nand, I have never seen someone play Dengar that aggressively. He was just zeroed. He was right in like
he's not allowing Corrin to get away.
No, that was a very appropriate approach for a notorious bounty hunter to take.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, he got it was crazy to watch, right? He gets the crit goes through, it's the double damage, Corrin's out of here.
Oh, that was rough.
So nasty.
Just heart sinking. Man.
It was, but like positionally, even if Corrin, I think, had survived that round,
bad.
he would have had a tough time getting out of that.
Yeah.
Out before it going down.
So, anything else surprising at Worlds?
Well, I think the most diversity that we saw was actually in the Scum faction. There were some really interesting Scum faction lists. Some old favorites like Dengar Manru and the Double IG 2000s. But
4 TLT.
Yeah, the 4 twin laser turret lists. But we also saw a double Shadowcaster list go like 7-1 on the first day and make it into the top 16 pretty easily.
Starfighter.
We saw double Protectorate Starfighter list. We saw a Hawk. We saw Palab Gadali with Manaru and Fen
I
Rao.
did see a Hawk flying around.
Yeah, so we saw some Wave 8 stuff, some Wave 9 stuff. We saw Jeff Burling's crazy Bosek Dengar list.
Which was crazy.
Hits like a ton of bricks and actually included Greedo. I think that's like just about the most bounty hunters you can get into a single 100-point
Can we get all of them in this list? Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So ultimately, meta feeling pretty good across the board. Every faction kind of represented. Every different versions of these lists coming across the board.
I think if Heroes had come out just a little sooner, I think we would have seen more Rebels because there's some fun T70 stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if Han's making the top 4 before Heroes of the Resistance, then like that's a whole new Falcon world that's existing, and Rey and Title and everything that's going on there.
I think Rey's going to make a bit of a splash in regionals coming up,
and the Open Series,
and that's
also happening, right? And then Worlds is right back in May again.
Yep.
So basically, it's really quite an exciting time for X-Wing because we have the first regional season in the winter. We have the Open Series ending in Celebration in April. We have Worlds in May, and into that we have Heroes of the Resistance that just came out, going to be tournament legal, and Wave 10. Right? So
X-Wing nonstop.
X-Wing all day, every day. So let's talk about Wave 10. We're going to talk about some of the cards that you guys think will have an impact on this meta and will shape it. And we're just going to go through the cards that we kind of talked about and discuss them and what the design of them and how they're going to impact the meta. So without further ado, let's start with a lightweight frame. This is a tie-only modification, 2 points. When defending, after rolling defense dice, if there are more attack dice than defense dice, roll 1 additional defense dice. You cannot equip this card if your agility value is 3 or higher. So essentially, a 2 agility or lower ship, that's a TIE fighter, can equip this card, and as long as your opponent's rolling more attack dice than you are going to get an additional defense dice. So who designed this, and how big of a deal do you think it will be?
I think it's going to be a big deal. It was really interesting because going into it, we saw the TIE Striker, and it's kind of like an interceptor. We were trying to see where it would fit into the game, and we've done a lot of like 3 dice attack, 3 dice defense ships, and so it's like, well, we've gone over this space a lot. So I was trying to explore this kind of design space between 2 and 3 agility, where it doesn't it doesn't knock out your 2 dice attacks that you're defending against, but also isn't quite 3. Like I think this is a very interesting place because against 2 dice attack, you roll 2 attack, I roll 2 defense. But against any harder attack, 3 dice or whatever, you're getting the 3 as though you were 3 agility.
Yeah.
But it also has the interesting place where if the attack is obstructed or if it's at range 3 or whatever, you're not getting like
an extra bonus.
An extra bonus. So it's a curious place to be where it's like 2.5 agility.
Yeah, which is really cool. I mean, you're finding ways. I remember in an interview a couple of years back, Alex was talking about how like there's only so many stats in X-Wing.
Yep.
And you have to be careful because you don't want to add complexity to give you more design space because that just creates this Frankenstein effect, right?
Yep.
But you're literally finding ways
to make 2.5 agility.
Well, to make 2.5 agility, right? Which is like fascinating. So yeah, this is a really cool card. What do you guys think about this?
I like it. Like you said, we have to keep searching for new areas within the rules that give us a little bit more design space to work with, and I think this is an example of that.
Without like making it muddy.
Yeah, no, it's clear how it works. It's in the existing rule set. We didn't print 2.5 agility on a card and like provide you a reference card or whatever. It works within the rule set, but it does create a new type of sort of variable. Auto thrust is actually similar in that respect.
Yeah.
It's like your agility, whatever you are, plus circumstantially, here's a bonus evade. And
accuracy factor is kind of similar too. You're like, you're whatever you are, minimum 2.
Minimum 2, yep. And like Concord Dawn Protector, like there are cards that are comparable to this that exist in the game. This is just another interesting avenue to get there, and I think it's a lot of fun, and it does a lot of work for ships that need the boost against the kind of heavy offense that's out there these days.
Yeah, so we might say TIE SF, TIE Bomber, maybe TIE Punisher.
That's what I was going to bring up is, when I'm putting a list together with, any sort of TIE fighter that doesn't have 3 agility, and anything else I'm potentially putting on it is competing with that lightweight frame, because this is a great defensive option for some of those ships who, can definitely use the extra help on defense.
TIE Phantom.
Yeah, well, and I think exactly right. It's just this cool like, it makes those ships that have 2 agility better, but doesn't like overly make them better or penalize ships that already have the defense dice built in.
And it also doesn't put any more pressure on ships with only 2 attack dice.
Yeah,
because they don't suffer from this card whatsoever.
Yeah,
with the occasional exception of being at range 3 or through a rock or something like that.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a great design space. All right, so let's talk about a TIE Striker only title, which is very cool, which is Adaptive Ailerons. Nailed it.
That's the part of the wings moves.
The wings moves, right? 0 cost title, so may or may not be an auto include on these guys because I just read it.
Yeah.
Immediately before you reveal your dial, if you are not stressed, you must execute a 1 bank or a 1 forward maneuver. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So a lot of the titles, right? It's like a 0 cost, or like with the Defender, right? It's like -2 and a free evade and everything. It's like,
why not?
Well, why would you not run this? This is a little trickier.
Yeah.
Because like having to go 1 forward or bank could actually be very bad.
Yeah, I think it's going to make the ship play a lot differently than other ones because as long as it's not stressed, it's going to be moving like 3-ish speed at least.
Yeah.
Because, the base as well as your next move.
Yeah.
So it's actually moving very quickly. But on the turns where it's stressed, it actually moves very slowly. So it has a very peculiar movement pattern.
One thing I was really impressed with when I remember we were testing this was I remember the discussion about adding the bit about how if it is stressed, it doesn't do the move, and how that actually changes its flight patterns a lot based on whether it's stressed or not, which is kind of unique. I mean, you have some repositioning and such, but this, until you've actually flown this thing, you won't have a good sense of how differently it flies. It's like it's flying with a different set of templates. Yeah,
it's really interesting because it moves at this fast pace until it receives stress, which is usually due to a K turn, and then it sort of loses its momentum almost in a sense thematically and has to get back up to speed.
Like once it gets
because it's got to clear that stress so that it can turn the title on again.
Yeah.
So it does. It just comes in really fast, and then if it ever gets stressed, it has to sort of slow down and then build that momentum back up. So it very much feels like it's sort of accelerating and decelerating, and it has a very unique character to it that I think is a lot of fun to fly.
And you can use the stress to slow down on purpose, which I know was part of your intention, Frank, and I really like how that works.
Yeah, part of the design was we knew that the TIE Striker was an atmospheric ship, and we're like, well, how do we play off of that to some degree? And so that was kind of part of this, where the idea where it's like, you're going to do a really high maneuver and you kind of stall out and come back down, that kind of thing. So it's that feeling where you're sort of,
stalling on purpose.
Yeah,
to slow
stalling
down.
on purpose to like potentially have your opponent not expect you to be not where you're going to be the next turn.
Yeah,
that makes sense?
For sure.
So the fact that you can intentionally throw off your speed, your opponent can't expect it. Like if you have abilities to stress yourself on purpose, you could choose to trigger it, like potentially elusiveness or a push limit or something, where since you did it, your opponent might have thought you weren't going to, and therefore you're not going to be that much further ahead.
Sure.
And such. So.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
You can throw some serious curveballs with that ship and that ability.
Yeah, it can move.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In like a real way, right? Because like if you have a ship, it's like one bank either way, followed by
Even a hard turn, that's like 135 degrees.
Yeah,
That's going to take
Players some time to wrap their head around how that flies, both flying in and flying against it. It's gonna
that's
be
really
it's gonna
cool.
be
Yeah, I
interesting.
mean predicting its movement is like it's supremely difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And like the fact that I can, depending on the pilot skill of the ship, right? You may have gone with some ships, and now it's like I did a 4 forward, right? And it's like I can either run or I can get real close.
Yeah.
And if like the real close would be a bump, and I don't want to bump, now I can run and like.
And another thing to note with this card is that if the opposing player blocks that first maneuver, you still get to do your regular maneuver, and if your regular maneuver is not blocked, you still get an action.
Yeah.
So
cool.
you can't just block that first mandatory maneuver because
But that makes the ship so hard to block. In
it does.
General.
It absolutely does.
Because again, you can change your up to 90 degrees difference.
Yeah.
So what was sort of scary about it was that that's kind of like what the Phantom was originally, where right before it goes, it kind of chooses what it's going to do.
Yeah.
In this case, it's very like predictive it's going forwards. So because
Yeah,
the
well,
Phantom
the
was
Phantom was
had a
different
lot more-
case,
It
right?
doesn't
Yeah.
have a one turn, so on its
no.
adaptive aileron ability,
Right,
which
right.
is pretty crucial.
yeah, so you can turn all the way, then you turn.
Yeah. Well, and it's also not, the decloak was a 2, right?
Right.
Which is like a dramatic movement
Yes.
versus like having to still go forward, right? Versus
feels
like 2
ru-
to the side.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
you
just
can
crazy.
roughly guess where it's going to be since it has to keep moving.
Yeah.
And that's another part about the ship's design is that it has pretty low agility because without that it's only 2, and kind of low health. So this is sort of what's keeping it alive because it helps it do this kind of free boost and repositional ability. So
Yeah, pre-movement boost. But
yes, exactly. Because it's not really boost. It's a maneuver, all that jazz. But yeah, it's sort of a different way to arc dodge.
Very cool. So let's talk about one of the ships that this might go on. The Duchess.
Yes.
This is a 23-point. Only upgrade here is the EPT, Elite Pilot Talent. 8 pilot skill, 3 attack, 2 agility, 4 health. So only 2 agility, which is not exactly high for a TIE fighter.
Yep.
But it does have the extra health than a typical TIE fighter. While you have the Adaptive Aileron's upgraded card equipped, you may choose to ignore its card ability. So
Yes.
the Duchess essentially says, I don't have to do this, but I can.
Yeah. He can play that mind game even further, where you're like, oh, you're going to move, and you're like, not this turn. And especially at high pilot skill like that,
Yeah.
I get to know the board state. It's not as crazy as Cinturfell, obviously, with the like, I'm anywhere I want to be.
Yeah.
But it's the same. You can, choose not to go.
Yeah.
And
Which
with Veteran
is-
Instincts, you are at pilot skill 10. You have a ton of crazy flexibility. In
Just
terms
whatever
of
you want to do, wherever you want to be.
Yeah.
And it has a focus, evade, and a barrel roll. So no boost, which is going to mean auto thrusters is a no-go. Can't take the boost action. But yeah, with the EPT, you can push the limit. The barrel roll means this with like a barrel roll even, and this ability to choose or not before. That's a lot of positional
Yeah, he's going to
advantage.
be anywhere.
As a ace player, this is like very exciting for me because it's revisiting this ability to reposition and get a ship somewhere without feeling like it's the old space we've been playing in for the whole time.
Right.
Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
It's very well done.
Thank you.
2 thumbs up to all of you
Appreciate
guys. Before we get away from the TIE Striker, anything else on that ship that you're looking forward to?
I think it's just going to be a fun TIE variant. It's new ways to fly the Empire, which is always a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a pretty reasonable way to get 3 attack dice onto the table, especially with the lowest one costing 17 points.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a nice cheap 3 attack dice on a very maneuverable platform. So
And a good looking ship.
it does work.
All right, so let's talk about Captured TIE for all those Rebel fans out there who want to take the TIEs. TIE Fighter only, Rebel only, modification 1 point. And so Sabine's TIE is coming out, which is this beautifully painted, crazy TIE Fighter with Sabine as a pilot, Zeb, Ahsoka, which I'm super pumped about. But this upgrade, enemy ships with a pilot skill value lower than yours cannot declare you as the target of an attack. After you perform an attack or when you are the only remaining friendly ship in play, discard this card. So effectively, they can't shoot you unless you've shot or you're the last ship on the board. This is a crazy card.
Or they're higher pilot skill than you.
That's true. That's true because they know the jig is up.
They know where you're at.
See, it's like you can fool Academy pilot, but not soon to your fell.
Exactly.
So only higher pilot skill ships can shoot at you, right?
Yep.
Where did this card come from? Where's the brain trust on this one?
This came from the fertile mind of Max Brooke. One of the nice things about having you guy on Team X-Wing is that he has brought so many new ideas and concepts to the table and really kind of has been a fantastic sort of shot in the arm for our design team. And this is an example of that creativity in play. And I think my favorite part about it is that it feels like something that the Rebel Alliance would do. You know, they steal an enemy TIE fighter, they make it part of their game plan, surprise, deception, guerrilla warfare kind of stuff is kind of the whole, MO.
That's how they roll, right?
That's how they roll. And this really expresses that.
Yeah.
Well, this was thank you very much, Alex. It's very kind of you to say. And I appreciate that you and Frank keep me from embarrassing myself by introducing any terrible ideas. Because for every good one, there's a few that don't see the light of day, and that's a good thing. But this one, design-wise, from a high-level inspiration standpoint, we see this happen in Rebels. They steal this TIE fighter, and then they fly it right into an Imperial Star Destroyer. And, so
how they roll. That's so
funny. So, we see that happen, and so I was like, all right, well, we've had a thing where they use a TIE fighter, and they just sneak it right into an Imperial base. So how do we do that? The pilot skill thing was the only part of it that wasn't just like sort of an obvious application of that, and that was a development based on some thoughts about, honestly, it's sort of a thematic consideration, but it works well mechanically too, which is just that the experienced pilots are going to be more observant. They're going to notice, even if you haven't repainted yours in bright orange, they're going to notice, you're like, oh, that person's not flying right, sort of. You're not going to fool the veterans.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's a cool bridge between theme and mechanics there. And I was just picturing, in a very practical sense, if you're flying Rebels, and it comes with a painted tie, but using the standard tie on there, which is just because then it literally looks like one of their ships, right?
Yep.
So you could actually have a moment where you're confused about which ship is which if you're flying Empire, right?
A strangely meta thing. We're like, is that mine?
No, really though, it's you literally could be like, oh yeah, that's your ship, right?
It's true.
Especially
they're both the same pilot skill and they're next to each other.
Yeah, especially because this ship, if it's not attacking, it's if you actually do just fall in formation with them, that's actually just incredibly good.
Well, you can do annoying stuff like block with it.
Oh yeah.
And if you put Sabine's masterpiece on there, which I think is the next card we're gonna talk about.
That is the next thing we're gonna talk about.
You've got all kinds of dirty tricks to pull.
That's so funny.
You can ionize the enemy. You can use cards like feedback array, anything that isn't
intimidation.
Specifically.
You just keep running into them.
Intimidation with blocking. If you're Ahsoka, you can be passing actions to your friends or to yourself, totally worry-free. Yeah. So there's a lot of dirty things that you can do with this card, and I think that is another reason I like it so much, because the crew of the Ghost and the characters on Rebels are really kind of close to the Scum faction and to that kind of fringe element in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
Thematically, and so the fact that as a Rebel player you can get access to those sort of more scummy tricks.
It's very fun.
Because Sabine's on the crew and she knows her way around explosives.
Yeah, she bounces around. So let's go ahead and Sabine's masterpiece. It's a 1 point TIE Fighter only upgrade, Rebel only title. Your upgrade bar gains the crew and illicit upgrade icons. So that's what you get an extra crew slot, which is crazy. And you get the illicit, which gives you all these scum tools. And that's really cool because you've seen Sabine in the show and in the game. I think she's now a scum pilot and also going to be a rebel pilot, or is a rebel pilot, and a crew on the Ghost and all that kind of stuff, right? Very cool.
If you are feeling the need for Sabine X-Wing miniatures, it's your game.
Yeah, we have it. So she's a ghost. She's a ghost pilot, right? A Phantom pilot, a Phantom crew. She's now a TIE fighter pilot. You also have her title for her TIE fighter. Are we gonna get more Sabines? Like, can we get a Sabine wave?
Time will tell. You want an all Sabine wave?
Wave 15 is just Sabine.
I think we can make that happen.
Official spoiler here. Wave 15, Sabine. Just kidding. So that's a really cool. I mean, thematically that's cool, but also from a meta perspective, right? Rebels getting access to a TIE fighter, which is cool, and you're only unique pilots, right? So you can't like swarm it out with Rebels, but like you can have a couple. The mechanic getting it's weird because they're getting an Imperial thing, right? But they're also getting the illicit slot. So you're kind of merging these tool bases, which is very interesting.
Well, it's.
Can you give Imperials Astromechs? Can you just make it happen?
I mean, we do see those courier droids in Rebels, so
That's
we know
true.
they have something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just
Chopper
saying.
murders like a bunch of them.
Chopper murders all other astromechs that come across his path.
He's got big guns. All right, so speaking of the Empire and its need for astromechs and new tools and things, one of the linchpins of the Imperial strategy in X-Wing at this point has been Palpatine. Emperor Palpatine, crew slot, typically on a Lambda shuttle. The shuttle finally finding its home in the meta.
And then some.
And then some. Yeah, he is around. Wave 10 gives us a totally new shuttle, right? Like the Cadillac of shuttles, which is Kylo Ren's shuttle. The Upsilon-class shuttle, technically, is the title of the ship. So let's talk about Lieutenant Dormitz. I think that's how you say it. 31 points, 3 pilot skill, 4 attack, which is insanity, 1 agility, 6 health, or 6 hull, 6 shields. Systems upgrade, 2 crew, and 2 tech slots, which is crazy. Focus, target lock, and the coordinate action, which I want to talk about in a second. With an ability during setup, friendly ships may be placed anywhere in the play area at range 1 to 2 of you. This is a wild, just everything about this is crazy. So you have a shuttle, which is cool, 4 attack dice, awesome. 2 crew and a systems upgrade with 2 tech slots is a crazy combo of things. Being able to set up at range 1 to 2 of this guy. So you place him, and it's like they could be in the middle of the field, right?
Yeah.
The moment you start.
It's only so you just need to touch that range band.
Yeah, which is pretty wild. Like, that's a wild thing that we're doing here. Coordinate. What does coordinate do?
I'll let Max take this one away because this is his project.
So the coordinate action, although probably one of you two designed it, right? Because it would have been for the first Epic ship.
I think
probably
that
made
was
it originally.
Frank.
So coordinate,
Because way back in the day.
coordinate comes to us from Epic, and we were looking at options for this shuttle, especially to make it a bit more unique and different from the existing Lambda shuttle, because we knew it was going to be more expensive. We wanted to make sure that cost was justified. So we looked back at the coordinate action in Epic, and we were like, actually, this just works. We don't even have to change this. Just drop it right on there. So the coordinate action allows you to take an action to grant another action to a ship at range 1 to 2.
Very cool.
Which lets you do some pretty cool stuff, especially if you have some higher pilot skill characters flying alongside you, who you can give those pre-movement booster barrel roll to dodge an obstacle or set up a sweet maneuver or what have you.
Or
target locks or what have you.
Put a block in place, right? It's
Sure.
like you have Soontir and they think they're going to be able to block it, so you bank with this to get it in range of Soontir. Soontir now barrel rolls, and then he can probably trigger push the limit to boost right there, get the stress, takes a green maneuver, gets rid of the stress. It's just crazy. So that really just opens up a myriad of tactical options for the Imperials, which is really cool.
You can also chain it with hyperwave comm scan.
Yes, you can.
Because
What is that? I don't even think I have that on my list. What's a hyperwave comm scanner? Let's pop it up.
Take it away, Max.
What's it do?
Yeah, so hyperwave comm scanner. Hyperwave comm scanner lets you. It does a couple of things. So it is a tech slot upgrade,
Which could go on this.
which can go on this, and you can still have another tech slot. It allows you to set up at pilot skill 0, 6, or 10. Or is it 12.
I think it's 12.
12?
It's 12, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
So the great thing about that on Lieutenant Dormitz is if you want to fly him with a mini swarm, you can set him out at pilot skill 0 and then put down all of your
in the middle of the field.
all of your pilot skill 1 Academy pilots or your cheap TIE FOs out for an early alpha strike. And on top of that, it gives all of those ships placed at range 1 to 2 of you, I believe, a focus or evade token.
Right, because of the hyperwave conscan.
Yeah.
So you can use speed. So we're really playing with new design space in the setup phase.
Which is,
you're somewhere we haven't explored before.
Exactly. Like last wave, you did you can blow up an asteroid debris, right? Which was a cool, it's another element you can mess with. But here, so this ship not only messes with setup, but the hyperwave, basically, you can set up at 0, 6, or 12. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And then anything that sets up within range 2 of you gets a focus or an evade.
Yeah.
Which
hopefully they can
hugely well with comms relay.
Yeah, because you just start with that evade. You didn't need to do first turn, so you could barrel that first turn instead or something.
Sure, and I mean even just the ability, right? Picturing if he sets up at 6 or whatever. So you put him, and then it's like you have an ace that you put mid-board, who then gets a free focus or evade, and it's like they can just imagine seem to your 5 forward into the fray immediately.
It's risky though.
No, that's crazy.
He's by himself.
I've tried it, and setting up the alpha strike it can pay off well, but it can also backfire spectacularly. So it's a really neat strategic consideration, and you can also use it. One of the things I really like it for actually is position denial. So you put that out, and then they're like, oh, so now this whole side of the board is suddenly, very dangerous. And so, they know you can get a lot further, and oftentimes that'll shift their deployment considerably, and they might be going into obstacles they weren't otherwise because they don't want to risk having to deal with your higher pilot skill placements
turn 1.
On turn 1.
Immediately.
Yeah. And this is another way for lower pilot skill ships or multiple ship lists to deal with getting out deployed in the setup phase, because if you have these advantages, you suddenly are the one who gets to see where Sunter goes and then deploy accordingly versus having to put your entire list on the table and then have everybody up against you place what they need to place after they've already seen your deployment. Yeah. It sounds like a small thing, but in competitive X-Wing, it's huge. That initial setup is
a huge
so big. Yeah, Paul Heaver calls it turn 0.
Yeah.
And he's written articles about it. It's a very important part of the game, and we're playing around in that design space, which has been a lot of fun.
That's really cool. You're messing with turn 0 now, which is awesome.
Yeah, one more thing about it. For a while, we were avoiding it interacting with setup because that ability just triggers the once. So, but we found that might be all it takes. The ability triggers one time.
If the price is right.
If the price is right, even with Han, for example, who is a setup ability,
yeah.
You're where you need to be potentially, and that's
from
the game.
Yeah, start of the game.
Right. That might be makes up for the fact that it doesn't do anything for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
It did that one crazy opener,
which is really cool. I mean, that's really cool space to mess with as well, right? And that opens up a whole new window of opportunity.
Yeah, we've done all these activation, planning, combat, but we're actually touching the setup too.
Very, very cool. All right, so let's talk about another ship that I think starts pushing on some things you haven't pushed on before, which is the quad jumper. And I think in the article that first mentioned it, the big thing about it was that it could move backwards. And we'll get there in a second. But I want to run down one of the ships really quick, and just so we can get the basic stats and understanding, and then we'll talk about the dial after that. So at 19 points, we get Constable Zuvio. Great name. 7 pilot skill, 2 attack, 2 agility, 5 hull, 0 shields. He has an elite pilot talent, a crew slot. I always forget the name of the bomb slots. Is it a bomb slot? Yeah. Crushed it.
Easy.
Tech slot, illicit slot, focus, and barrel roll, which is cool. The quadra can do the old barrel roll. When you reveal a reverse maneuver, you may drop a bomb using your front guides, including a bomb with the action header. So essentially, not only if he goes backwards, he can now shoot a bomb forwards, which is hilarious.
This is for you.
Gift. And so this ship in general, just a basic breakdown, EPT with a crew is already a pretty good thing happening there. There's a lot of fun that can happen between those two upgrades. Plus he has the illicit, of course, and the bomb. So before we dive into, let's talk about the dial really quick so we just have an understanding of this guy. So the dial, as I see it, he has reverse one backward, I guess, and I can't say one forward anymore.
Yeah, so it's the
one straight,
reverse straight and reverse bank.
And banks,
the two we have
right?
currently.
He also has white, one turns, and one forward, or one straight, as it is supposed to be said. He has green, 2 straight, 2 bank, white, 2 turns. He has 2 S loops, Signars loops. He has 3 banks and 3 forward green. So that is quite a dial. So he can ultimately back the quad jumper in general can back up a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. 1 banks or back, and then he can shoot a bomb out. So talk to me about the ship. The quad jumper. I mean, there's a lot here. The quad jumper, this pilot in particular, the dial itself. So what was the design process in this guy like?
Well, so when we sat down with the quad jumper, we knew we were making a space tugboat, which is something we have never messed around with before in X-Wing, because I don't know that we've had one in Star Wars really before at the scale.
Lore-wise, I don't think so, yeah.
I mean, like, I'm sure there's something in the West End RPG
no
or whatever,
doubt.
but, you know, like, there was certainly nothing.
Really? I was in that boat.
Certainly nothing in a film. So, you know, this was a really exciting opportunity. We talked about it, and we considered a couple options, and we settled on wanting it to have a dial that is just extremely close-in maneuverable. This is, you know, it needs to do those type maneuvering. It's a salvager's craft. It's a tugboat. It needs to be able to, you know, like get in around these bigger ships, pull them around. We know it makes atmospheric deliveries, so it's got a lot of versatility there. It's generally a ship that is very good for, like, you know, it's the ship you'd want if you were going to go picking through the wreck of an old, you know, Star Destroyer from the Galactic Civil War.
Floating in space.
Floating in space, exactly. So that was the process for the dial. For the reverse maneuvers, we knew we wanted them to be 1 speed, because for our first foray into ships flying backwards, we didn't want to get too crazy.
We'll save the reverse Talon roll for wave 15.
Yeah,
Sabine will have it.
Sabine's reverse Talon roll.
Yeah, what if it's reversed? Do you turn which?
I don't even think about it. Don't stare too long into the abyss.
Absolutely.
But even as Frank mentioned, I think even the reverse one is this incredibly, it throws you way off, because it's not something you expect. So the reverse 1 straight or the reverse 1 bank is just this weird, like, it creates a whole new paradigm for thinking about where the ship's going to be if you're flying against one.
Well, and I like it's red, so it causes stress, and that means if you look, none of the ones are green, which means that it can't just, like, stay in place, right?
And that was a very important consideration.
Yeah, it has to go back and then a little bit forward, and then it can go back, but like literally, if it goes back and then forward and then back, it's where it started.
Yeah. We didn't want to allow that.
But it's where it started stress, so it then has to go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you have some way to, you know, get rid of the stress.
Uh-huh.
Weird. That'd be weird if that existed.
It'd be weird if that was a thing.
That would be weird. I don't know. All right, so let's talk about an upgrade that's going to go on the quad jumper. It's a modification, 2 cost, action. Choose a ship inside your firing arc at range 1. Assign a tractor beam token to it. If it is a friendly ship, resolve the effect of the tractor beam token as though it were an enemy ship. So, effectively, something at range 1 of this thing, you can just give a tractor beam token to, which is crazy. Normally you have to hit to do that, right?
Yeah.
So a tractor beam token is you can barrel roll them or boot 1 forward them, and they're also -1 agility for the turn.
Yeah.
And you could do that to a friendly ship, I suppose, but that seems very risky.
Which you can use mainly for repositioning. Obviously, you're not intentionally lowering their agility.
Weird.
You
I don't want you
really
to
sure that you want that ship in that new position, because that agility is a pretty big cost to pay.
But I mean, a boost or a barrel roll randomly, right, or a kind of boost, a 1 forward, could be a game changer.
Especially since it's going off at whatever the pilot skill of the quad jumper is. So if you put it on Zuvio, with Veteran Instincts, for example, you can move him into place and then boost or barrel roll a friendly ship at that high pilot. So it's like that ship is then able to reposition at pilot skill 9.
It's sort of like a weird coordinate, kind of.
So there's a lot. It's, you know, we've seen that pilot skill 9 ship moves into place, arc dodges, etc. We've seen that dance before. This is another route to the same result. and it's even harder to predict because you've got a second ship in play.
Well, and like it's really mean if you're using it against your opponent, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like Soontir got out of arc, and now it's like he's gonna go back in arc, and also is -1 agility.
Yeah.
So like you can eat that in the teeth.
Yeah.
This is incredibly good.
Yes.
Yeah. Costing an action is interesting because they're more or less right in front of you. If you keep them with your capacity to shoot them, that was your actions. You're not really getting a modified attack. And with only 2 dice, 3 at range 1, it's not a super huge hit with your action having been spent to do this instead.
You've really got to be setting up for somebody else.
Yeah, it works best in situations where your tugboat repositions for other people to help.
Sure, and then considering the constable is a 19-point, that's very likely that you're going to have other ships.
Yes.
And I think in Scum in particular, right, you have a lot of these, even the Jump Master list that have the heavy guns, being able to force them into further range for some of these bigger guns or closer range for more damage. That's a really fascinating ability, and just the tractor beam token itself, not only is it positional, but the -1 defense. There's a lot of lists this could be.
Oh yeah, and we've seen the power of tractor beams really come into play in Wave 9. I mean, we saw it at Worlds. We saw Paul Heaver running an Asajj Ventress list with 2 twin laser turret Y-wings. Shadowcaster title is going to roll that thing, where it needs to be, and then
just
the
TLT
negative agility. Yep, you just TLT it down. He did really well. I mean, he made it up into the top 16. And of course, he had set the world's highest bar in terms of performance, but so he chose to leverage that. Tom Reed was using Asajj Ventress and Ketsu Anyo in a double caster list, and
Very cool.
that list has low offense but high control. So tractor beams are very much becoming a part of the competitive game,
which is
and
cool.
I think that's pretty interesting. It's yet another strategy that people are going to be able to employ.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of Paul Heaver, we have one last card to talk about, and that is his upcoming card, this is his 3rd card, right? So Bosek is a unique 2-cost crew. When a ship you are touching activates, you may look at its chosen maneuver. If you do, its owner must rotate the dial to an adjacent maneuver. The ship can reveal and execute the maneuver even while stressed. So this is crazy. You put this crew on a high pilot skill ship. You intentionally bump into one of their ships. Now, on the next phase, they have to pick a dial knowing that you can rotate it, which is terrifying.
Alternatively, if you put on low pilot skill, you run into you're about to go. You had to anticipate me maybe hitting you with Bosek, maybe making you have to make that decision.
Oh, wow. That's
right?
pretty insane.
And the other part is it's an option. I could hit you and go, nope. And you have to stay with what you were going to do, anticipating I was going to make you not do it.
Which is just a mind game. I mean, you're playing game theory right here.
So to get a little bit into Paul's design intention with this, as he was pitching it, we went through a whole bunch of ideas. Bosek was not the first thing we tried, but he was the one we ultimately settled on. He wanted something that played with that mind game space. He wanted something that could go on lots of different ships. And one of the cool things about Bosek is that he is not actually faction locked. And that's why we chose the character of Bosek for this concept, with the concept before the character. And we wanted to pick somebody who worked with the Rebels, the Empire, and Scum. And Bosek actually fits perfectly for that.
Very cool. Well, that's a wild ability.
Yeah. And if you hold up the card and you take a look at, you could easily mistake it for
Frank?
a slightly more clean-shaven Frank Brooks.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, do you guys have anything else? Wave 10's coming. Heroes of Resistance is coming. X-Wing is in a great spot. We have tons of awesome X-Wing events happening. What are you looking forward to over the next, between now and the next Worlds? Like, what are you hoping to see in that period for X-Wing?
Wow, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I could ask it in a better way, which is,
Sure.
what do you want to win Worlds in May? Like, what would make you happy to see, or what would the meta look like in May if it were your doing? Because you guys are the shapers of it.
Yeah.
I do hope that Sabine's tie and Heroes of the Resistance opens up some interesting list builds for Rebels. I think that with the Triple Jump Master being not as much of a threat, there's going to be more opportunity for creative Rebel builds. We saw Triple K-Wing at Worlds with the new cluster bombs actually do very, very well.
Sable Griffin rolling.
Yeah, rolling strong with bombs. Nothing but bombs, too. Not a secondary weapon turret to be found
Just
on
all
that
the
triple
bombs.
K-wing list.
I think he won one game where he did 1 damage with his guns
Yeah.
and taken his opponent.
But there's a lot of really creative Rebel list builders out there, and I think we're going to see some fun tricks with Sabine's TIE. I think we're going to see some cool stuff with the U-Wing. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting builds with the Heroes of the Resistance editions. Neon Num's really fun and strange to fly. There's a lot of crazy tricks you can pull with him. PS9 Poe may make an appearance now that the sort of thing to beat on the Empire side is this mid-pilot skill.
Right, where you don't have to pay for VI on 8. You can willingly go to 9 and take some other stuff.
Yeah.
And so you can maybe tech against the Suntir Fells and against the Defender list with that.
PS9 Poe is an important piece to the Rebel fight.
It's going to be interesting. We're going to see how that plays out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more Rebel diversity and hopefully some good, strong, competitive Rebel lists.
I know we didn't talk about it much, but with the U-Wing, there's a lot of crew members there that all do interesting things.
Sure. I mean, it's all the cast,
It's
right?
the cast.
It's Jen and all the guys.
Exactly. So I think there'll be some very interesting combo pieces there where we might see those, for example, on a TIE fighter, or in some other situations on a U-Wing, what have you. I think there are some interesting little nuggets
To be found.
To be
And
found.
you're excited to see people find it.
I hope people do some fun stuff with it.
And I think they will. I think they do.
I think so.
Are you looking forward to anything in particular?
Well, I already got the big thing I wanted, which was admittedly from Wave 9, but I did not expect to see Seismic Torpedo show up in a Orange list, and then it did, so there's that, I guess. But other things aside, I'm really excited, actually, for the Upsilon shuttle, because I think it enables some really interesting builds, and enables potentially some very thematic first order builds. There's some cool stuff you can do with the TIE FO aces who are a little cheaper, sending them in with an Upsilon for coordination and setting up some other cool tricks with Dormits or with Kylo Ren I think there's a lot of neat stuff there, and so I'm excited, especially with that and Here's the Resistance. I'm excited to see the Resistance and the First Order sort of come into their own. I mean, you don't have to fly them exclusive of other era stuff, but you kind of can now.
Yeah, it's a theme, and the theme is developing inside the game. So that'd be cool. I mean, I'd love to see the Epsilon and a bunch of First Order TIE fighters rolling in. And
be a fun match.
Doing some damage. Yeah, that would be a fun match.
For a Resistance Falcon and some T-70s
maybe
we'll have yourself a game.
Arrange such a match. So we'll see what happens. Well, thank you guys so much for all the hard work. I know it's not easy designing in this incredible space of X-Wing, and for sitting down with me for, I don't know, however long we've been sitting here. Thank you so much for sitting down. Thank all of you for watching. It's been a privilege. We have plenty more coming for X-Wing. As I mentioned earlier, check out our compatible tokens and templates for X-Wing, and we'll catch you on our next video.